Greetings and peace, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I have the honor, privilege, and pleasure of being joined by my Murshid, friend, brother, and Sheikh of the Nur Fatimiyya Sufi order, Shaykh Wahid Azal, who returns in part 27 in the series of conversations and dialogues that we have been doing. And in the latest talk, Sheikh Wahid and I will discuss the Baha'i connection with USAID and CIA and how that's like another tool of imperialism that these colonizers and these parasites are using. And before the Sheikh takes over, I publicly say that I'm always with Sheikh Wahid Azal against Haba'ullah and his followers who are hellbound. So without further ado, Nur alaikum to the Sheikh. Take it away.
Wa alaikum Noor. We just went through a bit of an ordeal for people who follow the news. We had a major hurricane system come through here, which usually isn't supposed to come this far south in the Pacific Ocean. This was hurricane or cyclone, as they call it here, Cyclone Alfred. Started off in the Coral Sea, which is that body of the Pacific Ocean between far north Queensland and Papua New Guinea. Started as a Category 4, which is just like an earth shatterer of a cyclone or hurricane, and just it took this erratic route all the way south, almost about 2,500 kilometers to here in southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales, and since last week, about Tuesday, Wednesday, it made its presence felt. I posted something on my blog about an operation I did, and it's very interesting to me because this was a theurgical or magical operation, because the minute I performed this operation, this cyclone started behaving extremely erratically, and it went from a Category 4 hurricane, and over a period of only a few days, 2 or 3 days, it slowly began to recede from that devastating kind of Category 4. Category 4 is the level of Hurricane Katrina. If you recall, Hurricane Katrina came through New Orleans back in 2004 and just completely leveled that town. That was the original category of Cyclone Alfred. And then just after I performed this operation, this thing started to recede, and as it got closer and closer to the coastline of southeast Queensland, Australia, the media here and the public were just panicking because of some of the early effects of this cyclone. It came through, but it came through as it crossed onto land, not just even as a Category 1 cyclone, but it lost all power and just became a tropical storm. But even still, it unleashed quite a lot of damage out here. A lot of flooding. The beach erosion here is just, you go to some of the beaches in the towns on the coastline here in this little city about 40K south of here called the Gold Coast. It's like canyon levels beach erosion. Like we're talking about like 4 or 5 meters, probably about 15 feet or 20 feet drops in some places of this beach erosion between the sand and the water that it's created. Homes inundated. The wind gusts that we had on Saturday were pretty bad. We lost our power here in this area that we are in Brisbane for about 36 hours. Luckily, we got it back, but we were prepared. I had flashlights and candles, and we had charged our phone, both my daughter and I, so we had still access to the outside world. I had stocked up so much canned goods out here that it's probably going to take another week or so to eat through everything. So it was quite an interesting ordeal, but that this thing lost power as soon as I started this operation was one for the books, and I wrote about this in one of my blogs about how I actually did this. So, here we are right now in this post-Alfred period, and per the last podcast that we did together, this issue with this character, Cunado, has not ended. And this guy has gotten more and more cocky. He is now basically editing pages on Wikipedia that should not have any relevance to the Baha'is. He's begun to edit the Wikipedia page, for example, of our late brother, Peter Lamborn Wilson, taking all references to his conversion to the Bayan and his association with us out. This is obviously a policy of the USJ itself, because they have a war with me, right? And they control Wikipedia. And this is an information war, and people mostly go to Wikipedia. But the information is there. This information was not only mentioned in his last book about his association with me, but also in the letters that were back and forth between Peter Lambert Wilson and I about his stated desire to convert and my acceptance of that conversion. But the Baha'i Internet Agency, and through this agent of their Kunado, under obviously the instruction of the Universal House of Pancakes in Haifa, Zionistan, don't want this information well known, because it's an embarrassing piece of information, given that Peter Lambert Wilson was a very eminent counterculture figure throughout, the 80s and the 90s, that towards the end of his life, he basically made an open alliance with me, is a big fuck you to the Baha'is, so they don't want this information known. And, there's a edit war currently ongoing between me and this Kunado character. We know who this guy is. We know where he lives. And so, these sorts of action do come with legal liability. And eventually he will be brought to book. I mean, he can be rest assured one way or another, we will bring these people to book. But given the topic of this podcast, one of the silver linings that we have in this second era of dump is that a lot of dirty laundry is being aired by this current administration about the shenanigans of the U.S. government. And one of these, in the dismantling of USAID, much of the suspicions that people have had for a long time are coming true. But it's a good thing, in my opinion, that they're dismantling this thing. This doesn't mean that we support Trump or his administration or the MAGA crowd. What I'm saying is that in this period, people like us should take advantage as revolutionary of a given situation on the information level. We are not with the side of Democrats. Pox be on their house. May they go to hell collectively, the whole Democratic Party. Definitely we are not on the side of the Republicans or MAGA. May they go to hell equally, in the same level of hell as the Democrats. We want this empire to crumble completely. And now that it is airing its dirty laundry, we're beginning to see that much of what I have been saying over the last 20, 30 years is proving true. For example, USAID was basically a soft power extension of the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. The information on that is everywhere. You don't even have to go to conspiracy theory sites. People have been talking about this, other than people like Glenn Greenwald and whatnot. You've had a litany of people who have put their finger on this. I remember years ago, Chris Hedges in one or several of his articles mentioned this about USAID, his experience of USAID when he was in Bosnia during the Yugoslav war, and then covered it in his coverage of Lebanon and the Middle East. He had mentioned this. So the credibility of this information of the nexus of USAID and the CIA is well-established information, and it cannot be debunked. So what did the Baha'is do? On their official Reddit page, which is r/Baha'i, about a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago, one individual made this long, ridiculous post about, about USAID and the current things going on in the United States, and very casually mentioned that he had to run into another Baha'i with a Iranian name who had been an employee of USAID for 30 years in Central Asia, in Uzbekistan, right? So it's very interesting that the Baha'is are sent to these Central Asian republics, number one, which are former Soviet republics, and also Uzbekistan is close to Iran. So, the CIA or the Mossad doesn't require to put actual agents on the ground in these countries to monitor, what is going on in that region when they have USAID, which has been the function of USAID to basically act as that sort of soft aid kind of power or soft arm tentacle of empire in these, former Soviet republics or in the global South in general. And Baha'is are everywhere. I've been saying this for years. that they are an intrinsic feature of this American national security regime, right? USAID proves it. And there's a lot more to that. I showed you that screenshot, something that I took from back in 2012, where this gentleman that you made a podcast with years ago, and then deleted it. This Sean Rachel is openly admitting that one of the people that he knows, one of the Baha'is that he knows, had been proselytizing Baha'ism to the former head of the CIA, James Woolsey. He was the director of the Central Intelligence Agency during the Clinton administration. The Clinton administration were extremely close to the Baha'is and the Baha'i National Spiritual Assembly and the Baha'i authorities and whatnot, which gives you some evidence of the fact that the nexus of the Baha'is to these the neoliberal wing of the Democratic Party, which are now basically been kicked out on their asses out of the political system. These are some of the good things that are coming out of this second dump era. This doesn't make it an endorsement of the dump administration and the orange monkey and his mug of followers. But in their own war with a section of their establishment who are their rivals, this is where people like us who want to see the entire house of cards collapse can use the situation to our benefit, especially when I have an ongoing war with the hyphen Baha'is, and this information comes up and they're volunteering it themselves. It's not nothing that we're forcing out of them. They're volunteering this information. The nexus is there. These people are an extension of that empire. They are a part of this snake that needs to be cut to size, and have its head cut off, and let the body die with it. Go ahead.
And you know what, Sheikh? That's absolutely correct, because what we know as the Baha'is, they're connected to all of this imperialism, and you always see them at all of these events, whether it's presidential inaugurations, the funeral of Queen Elizabeth, when King Charles was being installed. They're always at all of these royal engagements, at these government engagements. They're involved at the highest level of the Anglo-British American intelligence empire apparatus. Like, they are a part of that. And just like how sometimes you have, I've seen this with even Mormon missionaries who are like double, triple agents, and they go in to do what they're doing for the empire at some extent. The Baha'is are part of that schism as well, where when you see a white face, like in certain lands, like, you gotta know, like, okay, what's the agenda behind this? And whether it's the intelligence agencies or other people, these people are always there. And I think, at least with this, like you said, from the dump administration, this is like a positive aspect that we've seen with cover of USAID being blown and them being revealed for who they are.
And they're volunteering this information themselves. It's nothing it's not a leak from any document or anything. They're volunteering this information publicly themselves. So we know that, therefore the conclusion is that, as much as we're also opposed to the government of Iran, at least we give credit where credit is due. So the accusations that say these Baha'is are agents of the CIA is correct, right? And since the Baha'is themselves are volunteering this information, and since the secret has been blown open long ago that USAID is an extension of the CIA, why are they getting bent out of shape and being called agents of the CIA? So why all these denials, constant denials that they have given to human rights organizations about, we're such a meek crew of people, we're so meek and innocent. No, you're not. You're not meek and innocent. You are an extension of the Anglo-American intelligence apparatus that is responsible for the misery of billions of people on this planet. As simple as that. This is not an innocuous thing. You are an extension of the American national, or international surveillance imperial system. So, therefore, this whole human rights argument goes out of the window from that point forwards. They are a Trojan horse. And so as much as, I curse the mullahs of Iran on this specific argument, we have to give credit where credit is due, that these people are a Trojan horse in that society. They represent a fifth column in that society or any other society. On that note, back in the early mid-90s, just after the fall of the Soviet Union, when the Republic of Armenia had become independent, one of the first things that happened, you had avalanches of Baha'is going to Armenia under the cover of proselytizing and teaching their creed. It didn't take a few months that the then government of the Republic of Armenia basically chucked the Baha'is out, forced them out, told them get lost, and imprisoned a few of the people there. And their argument was this, that you represent a threat to the native Christianity that we want to preserve after the fall of the USSR. This was a valid argument. Then what happens? Then, I guess, through their own connections, they get the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, to put pressure on the Republic of Armenia that, at that time, because it needed funds and that sort of thing. And this is what they used. They used the IMF to put pressure. And about 5 or 6 years later, basically the government of Armenia was forced to relent. And so then the Baha'is poured back in there again. But it's interesting that a Christian government, not an Islamic government this time, but a Christian government of the early 90s in Armenia detected the threat that these Baha'i missionaries represent and acted accordingly. They weren't, this was not an Islamic government. This was not the Islamic government of Iran, nor Saudi Arabia, nor any other Islamic state. This was a Christian country. So now we are learning that it is through their pressure, right, through their connections, whether it be through Israel or through these various international organizations like the IMF, that they have put pressure on various societies and governments to force them to accept these Baha'i missionaries and a Baha'i presence in their respective countries. What does that tell you? That tells you that these people are a menace. They are a complete menace to the peace and well-being of any country, especially in the developing world. And they should be kicked out, 100%, just like the original Armenian government in the post-Soviet era did, kicked them out.
And you know what, Sheikh, I think this is absolutely right. And a shout out to our Bayani brother, Peter Lamborn-Wilson. May he rest in peace. And he's right that we have to establish a temporary autonomous zone. That is the only solution amidst all of this madness that I've seen. I've seen this in my own country with the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, that you have these people, whether they're Christian missionaries, Mormon missionaries, other missionaries that are with having a white face. 8 out of 10, it's not all of them, but 8 out of 10, those people are connected to some intelligence gathering apparatus. That is a fact.
Now, this is all being weakened, and it's all being exposed. Now, the question is why Trump is doing this. What does this ultimately represent? Is he doing it on someone else's behest? I think for our purposes, all of that is relevant. It's being done. So that it's being done, and then all of this foam is now coming up to the top of things, is something that anyone who's an anti-imperialist should pay very specific attention to and use, because these are the sort of talking points. Because once this thing collapses, it should not be allowed ever again to grow back its head, right? So this is one good thing that this Trump administration is doing, is cutting this thing to size, right? Now, I don't buy the argument that if it wasn't for USAID and similar organization, the world would have fallen into this authoritarian, cesspool, and that, this is the only barrier between. This is the argument that a lot of liberals make, first world liberals make. Their argument would be valid if USAID was a mere charity organization, not under the direction of the American government itself at the time. Even though it may have received funding from the American government, but not an extension of the American government. That is not the case. USAID was an insidious organization that was using aid of various, whether it be medical, food, whatever, as a form of blackmail in these countries, in these third world or developing countries, right? And that you find these Baha'is in that organization for as long as 30 years serving in some capacity. And that we have one person mentioning this. For every one person mentioned amongst the Baha'is, there must be about 10 to 20, even 100 more of them, right? So you had a cavalcade presence of hyphen Baha'is in USAID. And the fact that now they have been disenfranchised from their shenanigans through this, internal war between elites, between the oligarchs and the corporatists in the United States, is something that any revolutionary needs to take and use. Use. Now, the issue of Wikipedia is neither here nor there. To be true to the memory of Peter Lamborn Wilson, he would have cringed at even having a Wikipedia page, right? Peter was extremely anti-corporatist. He was anti-internet. He never had a computer. He was a Luddite. He did everything by hand. This was why his books took so long to come out and were formatted in the way they were, because he refused to work with technology. He believed that capitalist technology, in the way that it was advancing, was a serious detriment. I mean, to some point, I agree with his argument, but from another angle, I think revolutionaries can also utilize technologies against the system, and use various dialectical processes against the system itself by infiltrating it or using its own contradictions against it. All of that. So these are, strategies of revolutionary war and should be utilized absolutely by any revolutionary out there. We're not liberals by any stretch of the imagination, and the formal demise of liberalism is a good thing, because this thing was never about democracy. This was about protecting the political, financial, and class interests of a money bourgeoisie. This is what liberalism has always represented. Whereas this fascist iteration that is now cropped up, whether in the United States as MAGA or elsewhere as it's coming, to the fore, whether in France with Le Pen or the Germany with the AfD, these populists are basically safeguarding also the same interests of the same class of people, because that other political strategy no longer works and the masses are rising up. So rather than get these masses to direct to genuine left-wing causes or even communist causes, the whole strategy of liberals and the middle class has always been to siphon off, the population into the fascism. This is the story of the Weimar Republic, that the industrial class in Germany at every step of the way supported Adolf Hitler in his rise, and then from internationally, from Wall Street and also the city of London, the amount of support that the National Socialists got in their rise to power is all documented. This is not something it's not a conspiracy theory. There's been so many studies and books written about this, because they feared a communist takeover. They feared the left. They feared trade unions. They feared people-powered movements that would attempt to seize the means of production from out of the hands of these tycoons and these hoarders and profiteers. So this is what the fascism is about. Unfortunately, the masses in this time, especially in Anglo-European countries, have fallen for the snake oil bullshit of these populists, rather than realize that we're not engaged in the problem is not immigration. Nobody is coming to take your job away from you. Who is taking your job away from you? The people who are stripping your economic situation are making things more expensive, making your life harder, are not immigrants, are the capitalist class itself. It's the corporations, the plutocrats. It is these people, not the immigrants. But unfortunately, in these white Anglo-European countries, this doesn't seem to, register with the majority of the white average electorate. So they buy into this bullshit, and so here we are. But going back to the Baha'is, this era now emerging under this second dump era is starting to look to me as a very advantageous era to finally, inflict some kind of serious damage to the global reputation of this cult and its presence everywhere, because they have had the levers of information in their hands long enough. I do hope that Elon Musk actually follows through with his threat to take over Wikipedia and destroy it, because that place needs to be destroyed. Wikipedia, and the presence of these corporate and intelligence agency-based editors of that place, that entire place needs to be destroyed, because it is nothing more and nothing less than a purveyor of false information and misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda. So now that Trump claims to be wanting to disenfranchise this class, there has to be the next step taken to take out Wikipedia itself and to starve, therefore, people like this Conado and the Universal House of Justice and all of the whole Baha'i setup, starve them from their propaganda, from their propaganda nexuses and from their propaganda apparatuses. This is what needs to happen ASAP. This war on my end is going to be escalated. I'm just looking for the means to do it against the Baha'is, because I want, the issue is, this is not a war for itself. This is a war for the legacy of the Primal Point and Supa Azal, and also our own future legacy connected to that. And these people, that they allow themselves to go on the page of Peter Lambert Wilson, who in his last two books very explicitly, this is in public print, these books are registered with the Library of Congress. They're online as well for anybody who cares to go look at it, where he not only mentioned me, but he also mentions his own adherence to it, to the Bayan. Then following with the two letters and correspondences that he had with me, this should, be under any other situation a citable piece of information. But that they find this piece of information threatening and try to then, sleight of hand it or disappear this information tells you everything that you need to know about the Baha'is and how much they fear me and how much they fear these sorts of situations with Peter Lambert Wilson. But the fact is, and I've said to these people again and again, as long as I draw breath on this realm, I am coming for you. And I am never going to make peace with you. It is basically, for us, for me, it is a kill or be killed situation with the Hyphen Baha'i organization. And as simple as that. I do not give a quarter to these bastards and don't take any. And if they come, if whatever they do, I will find a way around them to inflict damage with them with even, very bare necessity of resources at my disposal. I will find a way. I don't give up. And they should have learned this years ago, that with me, they have a determined enemy that is willing to go to the gates of hell itself and even cross that border to put them where they belong. This war is not going to end until I put this snake, this shaitan, in its place, however long that takes. I am in this fight to the bitter end with these people. I'm in this fight to the bitter end with their various Trojan horses. That includes that fake ex-Baha'i subreddit, which is clearly under the thumb of the Baha'i administration itself, whatever they pretend to being dissidents and ex-Baha'is. That Dale husband, its moderator, its chief current moderator, is clearly a bought asset of the Baha'i administration and the USJ. And all those that are closely associated with this fool, who we exposed back in 2020 to be an active child groomer and possibly a criminal pedophile. This guy, based on that kind of biography, is a very easy and volatile character to manipulate and blackmail. And so it is obvious that how they have managed to pull this guy into their rank to act as their kind of ad hoc gatekeeper. It is obvious. Anybody who understands how counterinsurgency works, anybody who understands how the internet has been basically employed to these sorts of ends knows that these are the sorts of things that go on. So, this is the thing. We are at war with the whole Baha'i faith, including its fake Trojan horses, such as that ex-Baha'i. I have inflicted damage on these people, and I will continue to inflict damage on these people. We will hit these people by whatever limited means at our disposal until this thing falls, however long this takes. Whether I get to see it in my lifetime or not is irrelevant to me. The point is that I'm after you. You are my number one enemy, and I am your number one enemies, and I will not stop until you fall. Simple as that.
Yes, Sheikh, that's absolutely right. And I myself have been with Shaykh Wahid Azal in the Noor FSO since 2020, and I've seen in these last 5 years the scumbaggery of these people and who they really are and what they stand for. That's all these liberals, like, love and light and inclusiveness for all. Like, behind the scenes, they're all devils and demons. That's who these people are as well. And I've seen it, and I know in my lifetime, in the 2020s and beyond, we are going to see the beginning of the end of the International House of Pancakes, including the Zionist Israelis, and in addition to, like, what these people are doing through their networks and things like that. And I encourage people, even with Peter and Lamborn Wilson, who is a part of our order, and may he rest in peace. I encourage people to get his last two books so you can see with your own eyes, and it's properly documented and cited that he is with Shaykh Wahid Azal and he's a Bayani. And Wikipedia is going to be gone too. I see, like, I was looking at it a few days ago and I saw that they're just desperate for fundraising and money. It's going to collapse on its own soon, and I hope Elon Musk does take it over and just completely wipes it out. Because when I was in high school and college, if you cited Wikipedia as a source, you automatically failed the assignment, no matter how good it was, because Wikipedia is like a public bathroom wall where anyone can go and scribble in on the walls and put graffiti or put nonsense. That's Wikipedia. And unfortunately, a lot of these intelligence apparatuses have used it against the Bayanis and Sheikh Wahid, who's living mirror of the Bayan. So these people need to, get that straight. And I think there's a lot of big changes happening right now. Everyone, even here in America, I've seen that your average young person, their eyes are open. They're seeing through most of these things, and most people are rising up. Like, enough is enough. Like, these capitalist demons who have stripped us away of a future where we can have enough to just pay our rent and take care of our families. They even are stripping us away from that. So I'm with Shaykh Wahid Azal, and any sane person should be with Shaykh Wahid Azal in the Noor episode against the fight against these demons and what they're doing. It's over for them. It's over for them, for the Zionists, for the white supremacists.
100%. Look, whatever myopic reasoning Trump and his own cult and cadre have for doing what they're doing, our goal is something else, right? But like I say, we need to use the opportunity against the entire thing, against Trump, the Democrats, the capitalists, the corporate capitalists, the plutocrat capitalist, the whole thing, right? Because what this is doing, and you see this in the idiocy of Trump with his tariffs, right? Where this tariff war he's unleashed is about to push the American economy into a sharp recession, right? All economists warned him about this. The Wall Street Journal has been screaming and screaming for weeks about this, but he didn't listen. He did it. So there's a trade war, and now he's kind of reconsidering whether he's going to lift certain tariffs on Canada and Mexico. But this is all relevant. He has let the genie out of the bottle, and USAID and the dismantling of USAID is part of that, and it's such poetic justice that the USAID dismantled under the watch of Marco Rubio, who's now the Secretary of State, because USAID was one of the prime conduits of aid to the exiled Cuban anti-Castro, anti-Cuban community, or Cuban anti-Cuban community. It was through USAID, especially beginning from the Johnson era, because Kennedy established USAID. It was with Lyndon Baines Johnson that this, ratcheted up and basically, brought and corralled all these extremely right-wing Gusano Cubans, and made someone like Marco Rubio, who came out of that community, an inevitability, made it a possibility. USAID and Marco Rubio are almost synonymous. Okay. So that's now all gone, and proverbially, just like Kennedy refused to give air cover to these Cuban exiles during the Bay of Pigs back in April 1961, and you had the CIA and these armed insurgents standing in Cuba with a proverbial dick in their hands. The destruction of USAID makes all these various groups that this multi-headed monster, Hydra monster did, standing everywhere with their proverbial dicks in their hands. And this is a good thing. Why he's done it, Allahu Alam, but that he's done it is, so all we can say is Subhanallah, because this is a golden opportunity of a lifetime to now go after each individual node who is a beneficiary of this imperial skullduggery that the Baha'is, the Haifan Baha'is, were an intrinsic part of. I mean, for 30 years in Uzbekistan, God knows where else, you know. So I think this is great. Also, I mean, Allah Subhanahu does things even in the dark of things. In the dark of night, there's always a light shining from one angle of the darkness, because the darkness is merely the shadow of the light. There is no even a relationship of equality between the light and the dark. The light is always the master of the darkness, whatever the darkness thinks. So that's the metaphysics of it. And the reality now emerging from this situation can only get better. I am, whether they release them or not, I am looking very much forward to the release of the remaining Kennedy assassination files, because some of these files, especially this last batch of 2,000 that just emerged out of nowhere that they found, is going to reveal at least, or give us some inclination of evidence of what actually happened on that day, on 22nd of November 1963. Because anyone with any gray matter between their ears knows that that whole official story that came out of the Warren Commission, that the lone gunman and lone nut Lee Harvey Oswald, blah, 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 it was all bullshit, always bullshit. That wasn't what actually happened. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I hope they follow through with it. Obviously, they're not following through with the Epstein files, so we won't see that because that's going to implicate Israel in a very direct way. And some of the people responsible for even this whole declassification of a lot of these files that Trump says that he's going to declassify themselves are deeply connected to Israel. Allahu Alam, God knows what the politics of all of this is. But like I said, once this genie is let out, God help those who try to put it back, because this time they face a existential situation with their own constituency. Because I see today that this very MAGA, the most gung-ho elements of the MAGA, will turn against Trump, will turn against the very Trump administration if they don't, follow through with these sorts of radical reforms that they're saying. And I think those people should be encouraged. We should also be encouraging those people for that time to turn against, Trump and his, his gravy train of plutocrats and profiteers, etc. This is all good. This is, I don't see anything bad from this. It is going to be tough, and it's going to be very tricky navigating this terrain. We don't want people who are going to be a political or any kind of liability to us. If they haven't figured any of this out yet, about what the stakes are, then just stay in your corner, stay in your, side of things. Because this problem, this is now, we're entering into a revolutionary period. And this revolutionary period has been created by the very people we're out to take out. So, either get into the revolutionary mindset or get out of the way. If you're not going to be part of the revolution, we'll leave you alone, but don't get in our way. Okay? Don't get in our way, or don't get in the way of those people who are going to push this revolutionary train along until this entire system, this global system, just completely falls apart. Now, I don't like this term globalist because of its attachment to, as one of the talking points of the right and the far right. But first of all, we should clarify what we mean by globalist. In my diction, there are two things, two completely opposed realities. There are globalists and internationalists. Globalists are the moneyed elite who don't know any border, who don't understand any law. It's all about their pockets. So we're talking about the upper bourgeoisie. Internationalists are common people, right? So in the old diction and parlance of the 20th century, the internationalists were the global network of Marxists and communists around the world, while the globalists represents their bourgeois, capitalist, opponents. I am an internationalist. I am an anti-globalist, and that is a real distinction that people should take on board. Anyone who believes in any version of Islam by any iteration, by definition, is an internationalist for a very simple reason: is that we don't believe in this nationalist taghut, this nationalist idol, because the world belongs to no man. The world belongs to its creator. Al-mulk lillah rabbil alamin. The dominion belongs to God, the Lord of the worlds. Period. That means that potentially a Darul Islam or a Darul Bayan is the whole planet. No one has any more right to live in a certain place than any other. White people do not have an intrinsic right to be colonizing the Americas or Australasia, except these tribes of Europe, any more than the people of Asia or elsewhere in the Middle East have to come here and resettle and create lives of their own. These immigration policies of Western countries are all predicated by the assumption of white supremacy. This is why they're losing their minds, whether you're talking about the Europeans and their anti-immigration and their anti-immigration talk, or the North Americans and the same thing, or the Australians. They know that white supremacy is under threat, and white supremacy is going to fall apart. China is winning this war. Now, for good or ill, I'm not a friend of the communist Chinese government because they're not communists at all. They're uber capitalists. But the fact is that the economic war is being won by China. And this is one of the reasons why the Trump administration wants to realign with Russia, because they think myopically that if they can possibly pull Vladimir Putin out of Beijing and Xi Jinping's orbit, and then turn around and basically pivot to China to destroy the People's Republic of China and its economy. That train has come and gone. The West has lost its opportunity. This emerging power, the new superpower, is in fact China, and America is in decline, and there is nothing that they can do about it. What the Trump administration is doing, to the glee and celebration of many leftists and many communists and many Marxists, is that it is accelerating the collapse of this empire. And with this collapse of the empire, with it will go the hyphen Baha'is. So that means that we have to, we also now have to engage in two strategies. On the one hand, to help this process of the collapse of the Anglo-American world order, and then to prepare for this world order that is coming from the Chinese, that is not going to be a good one. The Chinese are not a benevolent force at all. So, and I have been saying this for years, that we have two enemies here, one who is on the back foot about to fall and one that is emerging. But this is what we have to be very, very clear about. But overall, these Chinese are bringing this Anglo-American world order down to its knees, and this is basically the subheading of this entire second Trump administration. It's all about that and nothing else.
You know what, Sheikh? That's absolutely correct, because we've seen that recently with the whole DeepSeek situation and how the U.S. stocks were like completely unprepared for that. And it's so interesting to see. I'm seeing it right here. Your actual white Americans and black Americans are now finding visas to go elsewhere. Like, hey, I'm going to Spain. I'm going here. I'm going there. It's crazy. People are getting the hell out of here because life here has severely declined. The healthcare system is shut down. I've experienced that recently with my father. And the whole quality of life, opportunities, it's like a third world country now. Even worse than that, because the government doesn't represent the constituents. You don't get a fair opportunity in employment unless you know people, right? It's the quality of life has severely declined. So it's not the same here anymore, that golden dream that they tried to sell of America. Now, other places have a much higher quality of life. But again, that emerging enemy, we have to look at a third force that will be there in the middle, that temporary autonomous zone, like Peter Lamborn Wilson said, that is the real solution. It's not the Eastern Eurasian is not the solution either.
No, they're not. That's another form of the problem. But I mean, basically what you just mentioned, that your healthcare system and public, all of this stuff is basically based on one thing. neoliberalism, and especially the uber neoliberalism of this plutocratic class that has now taken power in America, is about one thing. They want to raid all of the public assets, right? If there are public assets, if there's healthcare system, these people lose money. So what they want deregulation. They want to deregulate the entire American economy, and this is where their libertarianism comes in. Their whole, being possessed by the demon of Ayn Rand. They want deregulation so that then they go and raid all of the public assets and basically pocket it themselves. They couldn't care less about the common man. But the problem is that what we have is that the common man is being swayed by the propaganda of these shayateen. They don't understand by supporting people like Musk or people like Donald Trump or movements of similar scope, whether in Europe here or elsewhere, they are voting against their own best interests. Socialism is a good thing. It is not a bad thing. And socialism is not equivalent to the experience of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc. There are many different models of socialism. I mean, to such an extent that during the Cold War, the Europeans understood that in order to have a proper ideological war with the Soviet Union, that they were forced to create these mixed socialist systems of their own, whether we're talking about West Germany, the French, the Scandinavians, all throughout Europe. You had a mixed socialist capitalist system, government control, government planned, government had regulations, the capitalists couldn't do whatever the hell they wanted to do. And that's why you had a lot of European companies in their main base of operations operating out offshore of Europe, because otherwise they would be forced to pay this huge tax threshold. But the Germans, to their credit, have maintained some semblance of that from the Cold War. So any German company, even ones that are operating overseas, are still required to pay a substantial amount of tax, even if they're offshore. And what the government does with that kind of money, it subsidizes various industries like the food industry, etc., that then allows, that then brings inflation on food stuff and that sort of thing under control. Now, since COVID, the Germans sort of lost a little bit of control over that. But during the period that I was in Europe, the government of Angela Merkel was subsidizing the various farming industries and the various supermarket chains that have a global reach, such as Aldi. The government was subsidizing it on the local level so that the prices remain low. So your average German isn't paying through the nose for their grocery bills. I mean, I don't remember a time that I went, or my late wife Roya went shopping, and we wouldn't stock our refrigerator with 20, 25, at the maximum for 3 people, 30 euros for a week. That is peanuts compared to today or anywhere in the United States, where people, from what I'm hearing, people are going grocery shopping and paying $200, $250 for a week's grocery is very average amount that you pay. I mean, this is incomprehensible to me from my time when I was living in the United States in the 90s. How do people live? And especially with then the spiraling price of petrol and gasoline. People, public transportation in America is not that great compared to Europe. People are basically dependent on their vehicles. Where is the money coming from for this population to live? And now, with America entering this self-created recession by Donald Trump, it's going to get a lot worse, right? Your inflation is going to spiral out of control. It's going to keep going up and up and up and up and up and up until the whole system will crack. Simple as that.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. I'm seeing here, Sheikh, even homes that have multiple incomes, even they're struggling to get by, and it's unfortunate that we're seeing this, because your average person is just trying to take care of themselves and their families. But this system is inevitably crashing down from the years of imperialism and colonization and all the things that they've done to the world, to black and brown people of the world, in names of maintaining their empire. I'm seeing now, even with the TV shows and movies, the anti-Muslim propaganda is back on the rise. So this place, unfortunately, doesn't have a future. Plus, you don't know anyone. You're not getting a job. There's a lack of opportunity, inflation, And the people here actually, like, who are born and raised here, are now looking elsewhere for better opportunities. So we're seeing a big change in the global order in the next 10 years, especially, where I think it's going back down to the global south and to the east in terms of how they're setting all of this up. And I think, and I believe with all my heart, as soon as Zionist Israel falls, that Trojan horse that's inside, the International House of Pancakes, is going to collapse with them too, because a parasite dies when the host dies.
Yeah, that's it. When the host dies, but I think the host is America. I think when America dies, Israel will go down with it, because it's, Israel is basically a military base for the United States. This was one of the reasons I think that the cabinet, or those pro-Zionist lobbyists in the cabinet of Harry Truman, because he was reluctant at first to give American support to the formation of the State of Israel, but then they convinced him, and he put his American support after Stalin had already recognized the State of Israel. I think the bargain was that, okay, we will let you do your thing, provided that we are your boss. So this relationship has gotten very weird since 1948, because now we don't know who is the boss and who is who is not the boss. But with Trump and Biden, and before them with Obama, I think, to his credit, slightly tried to push back against Netanyahu specifically, but he didn't have the muscle to go for the jugular of the Zionist lobby itself. Trump, Biden, and now Trump again are basically locked, basically assets of Israel. They always have been. I mean, this is why I was very handoffish when Biden got elected. We saw just the callous way that his administration dealt with the issue of the genocide in Palestine. They facilitated it. They empowered it. So, when that administration went to hell, this was the best thing, So, as revolutionaries, we just now have to basically now take this opportunity. And so when these elites are going after each other, we take that opportunity to create the situation where they all go down together, including the Universal House of Pancakes.
Yeah. And it's basically, Sheikh, that true Islam that you mentioned. It teaches us to be like Ummati Muhammad, right? Where we are internationalists, where we love and uplift one another. All of humanity, and all of it belongs to Almighty God. And I think that's what we all have to come to in terms of, if we want to save this place, we have to come to that mindset collectively. Otherwise, the future looks very bleak to me. Everything is just collapsing in all the ways. People are stressed out. I think there was something I saw called the Schumann's resonance, and people are saying that they're feeling freaked out mentally and heart palpitations. People are feeling some type of spiritual change, and the whole collective is feeling it spiritually at the same time. They know something is wrong, and that nudge that's eating away at them is telling them to do something about it, right? Like, the system, come together and change this.
And the thing is that there are no very little spiritual figures out there that are kind of saying this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That are trying to galvanize a revolutionary movement. The Baha'is are part of the system. I mean, in every conceivable way. But all these various other groups out there, various other cults, which one of them are galvanizing their flock for revolutionary action? They're not. Because why? Because if they did, they feared that the repercussions of the system against their very existence would be harsh. They're afraid. So that tells you that they're more interested in maintaining their corporate structure than they are in actually sowing good out there. So right there goes the argument of these Baha'is claiming that I'm a cult leader, right? What kind of a cult leader puts themselves out there and is calling for revolution, knowing what kind of enemy he's facing? No cult leader, is doing that, right? What kind of cult leader talks about a temporary autonomous zone? What kind of cult leader talks about anarcho-communism? What kind of cult leader speaks openly against theocracy and Stalinism? Not this cult leader.
That's just propaganda by the enemy.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been with Shaykh Wahid Azal in the Noor FSO since 2020, like 5 years now. And it even says it in the Noor Fatimiyya Sufi Order Commandments, which I've done a video on. The Shaykh teaches us, think for yourself, do for yourself, follow thy inner voice. It's all right there in the commandments of what the Shaykh is teaching us to do, especially commandment number 3. And these are the same haters who are doubting, even with the Peter Lamborn situation. He's written it in his books that he's with you, he's with the Bayan.
Yeah.
You yourself are teaching us to be independent. So these people are just living in the twilight zone, honestly.
They are living in the twilight zone, but you know they need to be cut to size even further than they have been. You know, every so often they rear their ugly head. They show their arrogance. They get a couple of slaps and maybe a fist and a broken nose here and there. They go back into their little boxes, and then they come out. But this time, I think over the long haul, until we get to that 2030 dateline, we still have a lot of road ahead of us before we get into the clear.
And honestly, I think this road from now, 2025 until the end of 2029 and a little bit of 2030, it's not about the world ending or anything, but it's about the whole system as we know it collapsing, and a new phoenix rises out of the ashes for a new world past 2030. And like I've said, I'm with Shaykh Wahid Azal till the very end. We're going to see this through in our lifetimes, hopefully. And people are waking up. They're not having it anymore. They see all of the groups, agendas, organizations that are for imperialism and white supremacy. They're not having it anymore. And I think at some points we just sit back and enjoy the show. We don't even have to lift a finger.
No, that's what I'm saying. All we have to do is speak it. You know, we just speak. Yeah. And it happens. You know, and this is what floors me about this Cyclone Alfred, that the moment I began my theurgical operation, it responded. And it began to recede in power. I could, you know, this is the bargain that one makes in these sorts of situations, and you can read this also in a lot of the scriptures, is that when something is in operation, there's a divine decree behind it. One cannot stop it if that divine decree is behind it, but one can minimize it if it is a potentially destructive force. So this is what essentially flowered out of my magical working, my theurgical working with this Cyclone Alfred. You know, this thing, the power of this thing was diminished. It still made landfall, did its thing, and created the floods and the mayhem. But one good thing that I didn't mention that came out of that, in these communities around Southeast Queensland, one of the things that happened is that it brought a lot of people, a lot of communities together to help each other. Because, you know, this could have, especially if this thing had landed at the category that it started as a Category 4 cyclone, and we're talking about Hurricane Katrina level destruction. And all of this area of Southeast Queensland would have been completely devastated. This happened, by the way, there was a cyclone in 1974 in the Northern Territory in the town of Darwin called Cyclone Tracy. It came, and it was a small one, but it packed a punch. It came in as a Category 4, and it completely leveled that town. Completely, like a Hiroshima bomb had exploded in that city. And it came on Christmas Day of 1974. I mean, the trauma from that 50 years ago is still present because Darwin was a major town. So this could have done the same sort of thing here in Southeast Queensland. But subhanAllah, as it got closer and closer and closer to the Australian coastline, its power just receded so that by the time it entered the Australian coast, it had even been downgraded from Category 1. It was no longer even a hurricane or cyclone, if they call it here. This event over the last week brought a great section of the local population here working together. So your racism went out the door. No longer can you just look at these Indians or Arabs or whatever because if your house is flooding and your next door neighbor has a boat to save you and your family, you don't care what color skin they are.
Yes.
Right? Or yes. If your roof collapses on you, right, and it's your Arab or Bosnian next door neighbor or friend or someone from across the street who comes and saves you and makes sure that the electricity lines don't fall on your head and kill your entire family, you're not thinking about, these people taking your jobs away from you, or why are they in my country? Had they not been there, maybe you and your family would have been dead right now. So these are the sorts of events, and this has got a lot of this local population now thinking that really community is where it's at. People coming together and helping each other. If a disaster has to remind people of that, then subhanallah, let there be more of these things to bring people together to understand the real value of what the world and what life is supposed to be and what their creator wants from them. Not this, this capitalist shaitan and dajjal that is isolating people and feeding false information into the minds of people about things, and that these hypocrites like the hyphen Baha'is have been profiting from for the last 150 years. Where were the hyphen Baha'is during this disaster? What was the local spiritual assembly of Brisbane, or all these various local assemblies dotted over the southeast Queensland coast? What the fuck were these people doing during Cyclone Alfred? Probably fuck all,
Yeah.
on an official level, right? But average people here were coming to each other's help. I had next door neighbors knocking on my door every 15 minutes. Are you guys okay? Or do you have food? Do you have water? And I was giving these people stuff away because they didn't have it, because I had stocked up on so much food and water canned goods here, because I knew this was going to be a big event and we were going to lose power for a certain amount of time. This is how you build, not, doing what these idiots, these USAID clowns, the Baha'is have been doing.
And Sheikh, you're right, because it's even like what Ibn Arabi and Islam and the Sufi teachings, they tell us that if man were to come in his or her full power, mountains would move at our supplications. And if we come together as a human family and love and uplift one another, like what you've seen in your theurgical experience and live experience with Alfred, this is the model of what humanity should be.
Absolutely.
Love thy neighbor, help each other, all that stuff.
And also, as a kind of footnote to this, hopefully this Cyclone Alfred will wake up a cross-section of the Australian electorate to realize that the Murdoch press and their anti-climate change line that they have been pushing for so long is all a hoax.
Yes.
That these conservatives and these anti-climate change conservatives are their enemy. As simple as that. That we need to do something about this problem. The oceans are warming up. A cyclone of that magnitude should not be coming this far south in the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
To be threatening southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales. The waters are usually too cold for these hurricane and cyclonic developments to occur. But it came. And the climate scientists are saying more is probably on the way.
It is. And even in my home country of Pakistan, my cousins are telling me that, hey, it's been hotter than usual. I'm seeing here in my area currently where the winds have been so bad. I'd never seen this before, where every other week the electricity is going out. So Mother Earth, it's like what Surah Zalzala teaches us in Surah 99, is she's a living female entity. And if you disrespect the earth, you're disrespecting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So 100%. That goddess is going to come back and hold you accountable. It's like the state, right? If you owe the IRS or the state a debt, they will come after you, whether it takes a year, 2 years. One day they will hit you. That's Mother Earth doing that to humanity, that it's time to get your affairs in order. Otherwise, it's all in front of you.
It's all in front of us. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Just wanted to tell people that I'm okay. Nuri and I are fine. It was quite an ordeal, but we got through it, and it wasn't really that bad, other than the fact that for 36 hours we lost power. The rest was fine.
Alhamdulillah.
But my God, this rain, the buckets and buckets and buckets of rain for 48 hours straight, it just would not stop. The amount of rain. I have never in my life seen that amount of rain.
Yeah, the world is indeed changing, and I think we're all being given this wake-up call to come together as a human family and to love each other and to stop hurting and harming the earth and each other. If we can get this right with the example that you've seen in your community recently, that is the real solution.
But I tell you this is something that the indigenous people have known as part of the indigenous wisdom of all of these indigenous people.
Yeah.
The whole issue of mutuality between human beings is completely meaningless until human beings develop a relationship with the earth itself.
Yes.
So if we keep saying, do unto others as you would have them done unto you, that's fine. But there's a greater metaphysical, or natural metaphysical element that has been missing. And that is, you establish your relationship with the earth first, and then your relationship with other human beings starts to make more sense and becomes tangible. Why? Because this is what we share in common. We may be separate individuals, but it is the earth that is the substrate that unites other human beings. Allah didn't teach this, but the Quran and Hadith do teach this.
They do. And again, it's like that ideal world, what we're seeing with the Noor FSO and the teachings that have been given to us in the Bayan, is that one day there will come a time where we are not buying or selling the four elements as well, because that's a part of Mother Earth. And when that time comes, I think that's a major, major step in the reformation of humanity, the world, establishing our relation with God/Earth. I was reading something from Ibn Arabi recently, and it said exactly that. You disrespect the earth, you're disrespecting God. And Surah Zalzala describes Earth as a female entity, and how the Fatimiyya Sufi order teaches us to respect the goddess. It's all interconnected.
It's absolutely interconnected, but fat chance that these Baha'is will get their heads around any of this.
Well, for the Baha'is, you do not have a future. Haba'ullah, the International House of Pancakes, the Baha'i Zionist, you're going to be a thing of the past within our lifetimes, inshallah.
Inshallah. We pray.
So, is there anything else, Sheikh, that I failed to ask you?
No, I think that's pretty much it for this session.
All right. So until next time, everyone, until we do part 28, thank you.